Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which began on the 24th of February 2022, has gone through several distinct strategic phases. Phase 1, February-April 2022, was the failed blitzkrieg aimed at capturing Kyiv, Kharkiv, and other major cities, characterized by long armored columns, airborne assaults on Hostomel Airport, and a three-pronged advance from Belarus, Russia, and Crimea. Phase 2, April-May 2022, saw Russia withdraw from northern Ukraine and refocus on the Donbass, fighting a grinding artillery war to encircle Ukrainian forces in the Severodonetsk-Lysychansk area. Phase 3 has been defined in two ways by analysts. Historically, it referred to the late May to September 2022 period when Russia attempted to complete the conquest of Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts after the fall of Mariupol. However, in current military and political discourse, late 2025-2026, Phase 3 describes an extended period of attritional warfare, tactical drone dominance, frozen front lines, and escalating hybrid operations against NATO's eastern flank. This essay focuses on this contemporary understanding of Phase 3 while acknowledging its historical roots. By late 2025, both Russia and Ukraine had exhausted their ability to conduct deep armored penetrations. The front line, stretching over 1,200 kilometers from the Sumy region to Kherson, became largely static. Russia's much-anticipated summer 2025 offensive in the Donbass captured a handful of small towns, for example Vuldar, Mariinka, at a staggering cost in equipment and personnel. Western intelligence estimated that for every square kilometer gained, Russia lost approximately 50 soldiers and 2 armored vehicles. The reasons for this stalemate are threefold. Minefields. Ukraine laid millions of anti-tank and anti-personnel mines, creating defensive belts 15-20 kilometers deep. Russia responded in kind. Drone surveillance. First-person view. FPV, drones and reconnaissance UAVs made any daylight movement of armor instantly visible and targetable. Counter-battery radar. Both sides achieved near-perfect counter-battery coverage, meaning any artillery firing position was hit within 3 to 5 minutes. Phase 3 is, above all, the war of drones. The battle space is now saturated with FPV kamikaze drones. Both sides produce over 100,000 per month. These $400, $500 munitions have rendered much traditional armor obsolete. A single FPV drone can destroy a tank costing $4 million. Long-range one-way attack drones. Russia's Shahed 136 derivatives, Ukraine's long-range Boba and Lutyai drones. These are used to strike deep logistical nodes, oil depots and airfields, with strikes reaching as far as 1,500 kilometers into Russia. Reconnaissance drones, for example, Ukrainian Shark, Russian Orlan 1-0, that provide real-time targeting data to artillery. The result is a battlefield where no vehicle is safe within 15 kilometers of the front line. Infantry advances are conducted at night by small assault groups, often without heavy armor support. This has slowed the pace of operations to a crawl. In 2025, the front line shifted by no more than 30 kilometers in any direction. To compensate for poor tactical mobility, Russia has reverted to a Soviet-style approach: relentless, small unit infantry assaults supported by massive artillery barrages and glide bombs. Russian tactics in Phase 3 include Banzai charges. Storm Z units, composed of penal recruits, are sent across open fields to absorb Ukrainian fire, revealing defensive positions for follow-on forces. Glide bombs. Fab 500, Fab 1500, Fab 3000. Retrofitted with UMPK guidance kits, these bombs are dropped from aircraft 60-80 kilometers from the front, out of range of most Ukrainian air defenses. A single Fab 3000 can destroy a multi-story building entirely. Artillery superiority. By late 2025, Russia was firing 30,000, 40,000 shells per day compared to Ukraine's 8,000, 10,000, despite Western supplies. North Korean artillery ammunition, estimated 5 million shells delivered since 2024, has been critical. Ukraine's response has been a defense in depth using small mobile fire teams with anti-tank missiles and drones, ceding ground slowly while inflicting maximum casualties. Ukraine's kill-to-loss ratio in Phase 3 is estimated at 3, one in its favor, but its manpower shortage is becoming acute, with the average age of Ukrainian soldiers now 43. President Volodymyr Zelensky's government maintains that Ukraine will never formally recognize Russian annexation of Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, or Kherson. The official position is the restoration of Ukraine's 1,991 borders. However, in private and in occasional interviews, Ukrainian officials acknowledge that this may only be achievable in the long term or through diplomatic pressure rather than military means. Key Ukrainian red lines. No constitutional changes regarding NATO membership, though membership itself is deferred. No reduction of the armed forces, currently 1.2 million personnel. Russia must pay reparations and face war crimes tribunals. The Kremlin treats the 4 annexed oblasts as sovereign Russian territory. President Putin's stated conditions for peace have hardened. Ukraine must withdraw all forces from Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, including territories still under Ukrainian control such as parts of Donetsk and most of Zaporizhia. Ukraine must formally renounce NATO membership and adopt a neutral status enshrined in its constitution. Western sanctions must be lifted. Neither side is willing to compromise on these core demands. Consequently, peace talks have been non-existent since early 2025, with the exception of prisoner exchanges mediated by the UAE and Saudi Arabia. Phase 3 has seen a shift in international alignment. United States. Following the 2024 election, the new administration reduced direct military aid by 40%, shifting to loans and frozen Russian asset transfers. However, intelligence sharing and long-range weapon permissions, for example, ATACMS and Storm Shadow strikes into Russia, continue. European Union. France and Germany have pushed for a peacekeeping force proposal, while Poland and the Baltic states demand total Russian defeat. Hungary and Slovakia remain obstructionist. China. Officially neutral but economically supporting Russia through purchasing energy, dual-use goods, electronics, machine tools, and providing satellite imagery. China has proposed its own peace plan, but it closely mirrors Russian demands. North Korea and Iran. North Korea has sent 50,000 workers and 10,000 troops, disguised as Russian forces, to help with logistics and engineering. Iran continues to supply Shahed drones and has begun producing them in a new factory in Tatarstan. Russia has entered a full mobilization economy. By early 2026, defense spending accounts for 40% of federal budget, up from 15% pre-war. Inflation exceeds 12%. The ruble is managed via capital controls, and the central bank's key interest rate is 19%. Labor shortages are critical. 500,000 men have fled the country since 2022, and another 300,000 have been killed or permanently disabled. Russia is recruiting from Central Asian migrants and offering contracts to Nepalese, Somali, and even Afghan fighters. Nevertheless, Russia's oil and gas revenue remains resilient, rerouted through India, Turkey, and the UAE, the Shadow Fleet. The IMF estimates Russia's GDP grew 3.7% in 2025 due to military Keynesianism, but this is a wartime bubble. Ukraine survives entirely on external support. The state budget is 60% funded by foreign grants, EU, IMF, US. GDP collapsed by 30% in 2022 and has only recovered to 80% of pre-war levels. Electricity grid has been hit by over 1,200 cruise missiles and drones. Rolling blackouts are routine. Population has fallen to 28 million, from 43 million pre-war, due to emigration and casualties. Over 6 million Ukrainians remain abroad, most unwilling to return while the war continues. To sustain troop numbers, Ukraine passed a controversial mobilization law lowering the conscription age to 22 and fining draft evaders up to $5,000. Desertion rates have ticked upward. Phase 3 has seen Russia open new fronts in the hybrid domain, targeting NATO members. In 2025, Russian intelligence, GRU, was implicated in setting fire to a munitions factory in Poland, bombing a railway carrying military aid in the Czech Republic, and cyber attacks on German hospitals and French port systems. The Shadow War in the Baltic Sea, Russian vessels suspected of severing undersea cables between Estonia, Finland, and Sweden, Lithuania. Russia has increased its military presence in Transnistria, a breakaway Moldovan region, staging false flag incidents. Moldova, an EU candidate, is increasingly destabilized. Georgia's breakaway regions, Abkhazia, South Ossetia, have signed integration agreements with Russia, and Russia has placed Iskander missile systems there. Throughout Phase 3, Russia has conducted tactical nuclear exercises, non-explosive drills involving Iskander missiles and air-launched Kinzhal missiles. Belarus now hosts Russian nuclear warheads. While most analysts believe a nuclear detonation is unlikely, the threat is used to deter Western intervention in Crimea or the Black Sea. Depending on Western policy and Russian domestic stability, Phase 3 could evolve into one of 4 outcomes by 2028. The front line solidifies as a de facto border with sporadic fighting but no major offensives by either side. Ukraine does not formally cede territory, but the frozen conflict allows Europe to accept a new status quo. Russia keeps occupied land. Ukraine joins the EU but not NATO. If oil prices drop sharply, for example global recession, and China reduces support, Russia could face a 1990s-style economic crash. Military mutinies or a power struggle in the Kremlin might lead to a sudden Russian withdrawal. This is considered the least likely scenario due to Putin's tight control. Russia launches a successful 2026 summer offensive using cumulative attrition, breaks through Ukrainian lines, and captures the remaining Donetsk region and parts of Kharkiv. Ukraine may be forced into negotiations, ceding land for security guarantees. This would be seen as a catastrophic Western failure. A major Russian strike on a NATO target, for example a Polish airfield hosting F-16S or a US base in Romania, triggers Article 5. This could rapidly escalate to conventional war in the Baltics or the Black Sea, with a high risk of crossing nuclear thresholds. Early 2026 intelligence suggests Russia has deployed nuclear-capable missiles in Kaliningrad, raising tensions. Phase 3 of Russia's invasion is not a temporary stage but may define European security for a generation. It is a war that no longer seeks rapid decision, but instead tests which society can endure longer, a revanchist Russia willing to sacrifice its young men, or an exhausted Ukraine dependent on fickle Western allies. The battlefield has become a laboratory for future warfare, dominated by drones, mines, and electronic warfare. Diplomacy is frozen. Hybrid attacks creep westward. For Ukraine, the goal has shifted from victory to survival. For Russia, the goal is to wait out the West. For the world, Phase 3 is a grim preview of a new era. Great power conflict without clear ends, fought on the edges of empires with untethered technology and unconstrained violence. Unless one side's internal cohesion breaks, the war may continue well into the 2030s. That is the sobering reality of Phase 3.